I'm going to try to make the case that cold brew has come a long way in the last 5 years and has a long way to go, and that you can be a part of it by improving different things, trying new things in your shop. So that's the goal of this. We're looking to try to spread some ideas, create some inspiration, at the very least provide you, or at least consider a new way to think about cold brew. So for the introduction, not even there. You see a picture of my family. I have 4 kids now. So that my wife is my middle school sweetheart. We middle school, high school, college, straight through. And I have a 7-year-old girl who's in 2nd grade. I have 2 3-year-old twins. That's their birthday party last week. And then a 3-month-old. So I am busy, but that's my life, and I love it. The other thing that keeps me busy is my full-time job as a professional engineer. So I'm a civil engineer. That's my day job. I do trains. So if you took a Metrolink, LA Metro, any of the San Diego trains, the Coaster, that's my day job. So my training and my background is all in engineering. That's what I do for fun, and I love it. Some people have this idea that like corporate America is the worst, and I'll do anything I can to get out of it, and that's not my story. I love my job. I love what I do. I just like coffee too. I like cold brew the most, so I'm doing it all. I'm trying, at least. So my coffee story is pretty simple. My best friend has a coffee shop, and he makes really great cold brew. He makes really great everything, but the thing I like most about what he does is his cold brew. And when I cut cream and sugar out of my diet, dairy and sugar, he suggested, and I told him I can't do straight espresso. I don't like it. It's too harsh. Even just the regular coffee that my work is serving is undrinkable. So I'm gonna have to maybe switch to tea. I got to figure something else out. And his suggestion was cold brew for me. He said it's smoother, it's sweeter than regular coffee. You could drink it black, give it a shot. And I did, and I loved it. So he had this huge pallet of bottles in his warehouse that he hadn't done anything with. And so I said, you need to be doing more cold brew. He said, it frustrates me so much when I'm brewing, frustrates my workers, that I don't want to scale cold brew at all. And I'd rather focus on other things because it's such a pain. And so what I suggested is that in my spare time, which I have little of, on my nights and weekends, I would be brewing cold brew for him, making bottles, bottling it up for his shop, do kegs for him, do growlers, whatever he could do to get more cold brew out so that I could be taking it to work, taking it on trips, whatever I could do to help him make that happen. So me and my co-founder at Alto Cold Brew did that for about 1.5 years. We ran his cold brew program nights and weekends, and then he was able to serve it, which is actually one of the benefits of cold brew, is that it doesn't have to be prepared immediately in front of the customer. You can actually do stuff off your normal busy cycle, and that was something that I was trying to show him, is that you can have people do it when you're not busy, and you could still have a good cold brew program. So that was unsustainable for me long term. I couldn't do normal coffee shop hours, and as we were scaling that, I couldn't do my nights and weekends. So I started to think and brainstorm with my co-founder, what did we like about cold brew? Everything. What did we not like about brewing it? And we came up with a list of 10 problems that we thought that we could try to start addressing, and they all really came back to the way it was brewing. That was the one reason why my friend wasn't going to scale his program, and that was our biggest frustration in actually brewing large amounts of cold brew. And so what we decided to do was attack kind of the preparation process. And so our coffee story, mine was that of just being like a super fan and then trying to solve a problem that we saw existed in the shop and with a lot of the people that we talked to. I attacked it like I would anything in engineering, right? Learned everything I could about it, researched it for a year, tried every little sample and put it through every little test I could, and we came up with a filter material that we like, performs well, and addressed all of our issues with it. So for specialty cold brew, the idea here is that, I don't know if that really adds anything, is that specialty cold brew is the next step. So specialty coffee for a long time has been this thing that has been growing organically over time. People started caring more and more about quality over the last 30 to 40 years, and everything that meant through the entire supply chain, through growing the coffee, sourcing the coffee, processing it, shipping it, the way they were roasting it, the way they were serving it. Specialty coffee followed this trend of just increased quality, increased community, increased amount of collaboration, and ultimately it became a better product for the consumer. And the consumer started to really appreciate and be willing to pay more and more and more money for coffee. That same trend has happened for like specialty and craft beer. For wines, you've seen that same trend happen where something that was relatively generic, kind of the big three American brewing companies, all of a sudden there was an explosion in imported beer, now craft beer, and that it's here to stay for beer, it's here to stay for wine, it's here to stay for specialty coffee, and I would argue that we're in the process of doing that for cold brew. It's just trailing behind. So what I have laid out here is kind of 10 steps to think about as a coffee shop to try to elevate that craft of cold brew. As a matter of fact, that kind of phrase is our mission statement as a company at Alto Cold Brew. We're on a mission to help shops elevate the craft of cold brew. So this is kind of like a generic shop layout. It's actually the shop that we started brewing in. My best friend is Stevie Hassmeyer. He runs Arcade Coffee Roasters out of Riverside, California. And what I'm trying to show with this picture is different areas that you can think about in your shop where cold brew can be featured that maybe it wasn't. So he was my only exposure to coffee, and when I would go to other coffee shops, I would have a hard time even finding cold brew on the menu. Oftentimes you see like a couple filter options, a ton of espresso-based and milk-based options, but I couldn't find cold brew. There's a bottom right-hand corner, maybe next to one tea option and the chocolate milk, but it was always mostly an afterthought on the menu. And it wasn't like that in his shop and with what we were doing. And so part of the impetus of this is that we're trying to show other people different ways that cold brew can be expanded, and it can take up like a full third of the menu in places where sometimes it's a bit of an afterthought. So, I mean, my first thing, I still see shops doing this. I would say to serve cold brew. It's super easy to get started. The entry point on cold brew, especially with just the little manual brewers and stuff, are incredibly low. You can make your money back just by brewing cold brew through that first 50 pack of filters, whatever type of company you go with. Most people are doing, 20 to 50 filters, and you can make all your money back easily. So like there's not a price barrier to cold brew where you need a big expensive espresso machine or anything else. I mean, it is simple. It's super approachable. For me, specialty coffee was intimidating. All the different menu options and espresso and filter, and I had to understand origins and preparation methods with the pour over. And cold brew is not like that. Cold brew is prepared for you. It's really good. It's easy to drink. And that's one of the things that I like most about it. And I think that's one of the ways that you can get new people in specialty coffee kind of on board is, here, try this. This is just plain black coffee in a way that they probably haven't experienced plain black coffee. I mentioned before how it can improve workflow. You can prepare cold brew ahead of time. It doesn't need to be prepared immediately in front of the customer. You don't have to wait to pull the shot, wait to pour the milk. You can just make it ahead of time, serve it on tap, pour it out of a pitcher, whatever you need to do. The process of serving cold brew is way easier than the process of serving a pour over or an espresso milk-based drink. It's easy to give samples. If you think about it, you go to like a winery, they'll give you like a little sample. A brewery, they'll give you a little sample. You can't really get a sample of espresso or like a little sample. Let me try your latte. That's a ridiculous question. They'd have to make you an entire latte. But you can give somebody like a little sample of your cold brew, and they can try a couple different ones if that's what you have. And that's just something that you can't do with the rest of coffee that you can do with cold brew. And then one of the interesting things too is people will source coffee intentionally for their filter coffee, for their single origins, for their espressos. They'll roast it differently, and they don't always do that for cold brew. So that's an opportunity right there to be intentionally sourcing and roasting coffee specifically for cold brew. So like step one, I mean, if you're not serving cold brew, I would say serve cold brew. Step two is offer a variety. Because it's so easy and because it's so inexpensive, it's not that complicated to brew 2 different kinds. It's not that complicated to brew 3 different kinds. We typically see like a cold brew blend, and then every now and then we'll see a shop do 1 or 2 single origins. I don't know why we couldn't do more single origins in shops. Some of my favorite experiences I've ever had with cold brew is when they actually serve you a flight. This one in particular is from a shop in Portland that had the exact same coffee processed 3 different ways, and then you could try it in cold brew. And anytime you can taste something side by side, you could start to experience the differences and figure out what you like. So someone new to a shop, you might direct them first to a flight and say, here, try our cold brews before you decide what you want to buy, or maybe something that you're used to ordering, this might spur you to order something different or new. So that's a way to expand your menu pretty simply and easily. Oftentimes, kegerators will have 2 or 3 taps. It's not difficult to change out. You can have a couple pitchers however you're serving it, but cold brew flights is really easy to do in a way that coffee flights isn't. One of the other shops I've been to in Seattle actually offer the same coffee on cold brew, on espresso, and on filter. So it's just another way to show people the variety of coffee that's possible in the shop that maybe people are just stuck in their rut. So the next thing I would say too is to serve craft drinks. So for me, what I'm saying when I'm saying craft drinks is like a simple syrup, maybe a bitter. You're adding like some spices to it, maybe some milk or latte. There's ways that you can improve upon the flavor profiles or even offer something seasonally with cold brew. That's super easy. I mean, you have your base already ready to pour. So just like in any bar, you can just add a couple things to it and you have your own flavor combination. There's a lot of shops that'll do something like a honey cinnamon latte. Well, a honey cinnamon latte, even though honey's a little bit difficult in cold brew, isn't impossible to match that same flavor profile. You get a mint mocha for Christmas time, and you can use almost all the same ingredients in your latte that you can use in your cold brew. And it extends your menu. It gives them like a higher price point to hit, something different and new to try, something seasonal that can rotate on and off. It lets your baristas and your coffee, the people who are pushing your coffee program to try and experiment and try new things, because I think that's what a lot of people like to see in their favorite shops is something new on the menu, something interesting on the menu, or something that they haven't seen. So you can use the ingredients in the shop. I think it gives more interest in variety, and it's really easy to justify a higher perceived value. Basic cold brew, but if we're going to add something to it, throw it in a shaker and pour you a drink and maybe even add a garnish, I mean, you can charge a good amount more for that, and that's a different experience for them than just getting something on tap and walking out. It's easy to rotate seasonally. Like I said, you could do promotions, you can match it with your lattes that you're doing, but there's a lot of opportunity to expand on just basic cold brew if you're serving craft drinks. So to make your own ingredients is not that difficult. Simple syrups is literally sugar, water, and a flavor. You heat it, it doesn't take more than 5 or 10 minutes, and people like the idea that you're taking the time to craft something special for them. And again, it gives your own team a chance to kind of experiment and grow the menu in different ways. It's not hard to make your own nut milks. You can put garnishes in there, different spices, but really you can experiment with what you're doing in cold brew in a way that you can show throughout the rest of your menu with your hot coffees. And sometimes if you're serving food, we've seen shops do a great job of incorporating their food program into their signature drink offerings. So there's a lot of potential there, even just in making your own ingredients. It increases that like craft and custom and high quality presentation that you're looking for your customers. The next thing to consider is to serve it on tap. I didn't start with this because most people, the idea of like getting a kegerator, finding the space for a kegerator, buying the kegs, figuring out gas, getting them back and forth, there is something to it. There is a bit of a challenge. But when you serve it on tap, it makes it 10 times easier. It increases your bar flow. It increases your consistency. It allows you to offer nitro cold brew, which is still a really popular item. It's essentially your same cold brew, just with more nitrogen in it to create that big head that you've seen And serving it on tap is a great way to expand your menu. The picture there, it's a little blurry, it's out of focus. Well, it's focusing on the cold brew, but that's a 3-tap head out of a single kegerator. So you can put 2 or 3 little kegs in there and serve, your entire menu just off of that one unit. So I mean, there's options in really tight spaces to really expand what you're able to offer. The other picture has 4 heads on it. So I mean, there's definitely people out there, not us, but there's people out there who can show you how to serve a lot of different cold brews on tap in your space. It's another thing to do that I've seen a lot of shops work with is an actual cold brew program. So you can take, if you're brewing cold brew and you figure out your own tap system, you have an office down the street who wants to do something better for their employees than their Keurigs or whatever, you can rent them a machine like this. You can be part of their delivery service, and it's not difficult for you to expand your cold brew into the field by using tap systems. It's much harder. You're not going to brew them pitchers of cold brew or anything like that, but that's something that's definitely possible to do. And once you're in the process of making kegs and really dialing in your cold brew process, and you understand how these work with the pressure in the tanks, it's not hard to service customers and clients that way. Maybe even the same people that you're serving restaurants or event centers that you're selling roasted coffee to, they still might be interested in your cold brew. So the idea is just to figure out all the different opportunities for cold brew in your shop and not just be limited to, again, that bottom right hand corner of the menu where it's a bit of a forgotten item. It definitely has the potential to be more than that. This next one is offer growlers. It gives you an opportunity to actually take home prepared coffee in a way that you can't with lattes, you can't with filter coffee. No one's going to come in with a big hydro flask and say, hey, just fill this thing up with hot coffee. I'm going to take it home and drink it for the week. But that's definitely possible to do with cold brew. It keeps longer. It keeps between a week and 2 weeks, depending on how people are storing it. I take it on trips. I take it to work. I take it everywhere I can because it's a way that I can get good coffee in places where I can't necessarily prepare coffee on my own, or I can't necessarily count on the coffee being good when I'm there. So it's super easy to travel with. It's a good way to get your brand out there in front of your customers in a different way. And you can offer samples or flights if people are trying to figure out which kind of one to put in their growler. That's another opportunity for you to, hey, try a couple, pick your favorite one, and there's a $20 sale instead of a $4 sale for you. And it's easy to fill with your taps. You just sit right there and you've got your tap there. That does not take very long to fill and sell a growler. This next one is encouraging home cold brewing. Cold brewing is like one of the simplest processes in coffee. In specialty coffee, very few people have a specialty grade espresso machine at home. Very few people have all of the pour over elements that you would need with the scales, the special grinders, and everything else. But there is a really simple thing that people can brew at home that is specialty coffee. Cold brewing for most people with the full immersion systems is nothing more than just a big tea bag with coffee in it, steeped over time at temperature. People can do that at home. They can add their own water. They can steep it in any pitcher that they have, and they can really brew it at home in a way that they can't do as easily within specialty coffee. It's a much higher financial cost. It's a much steeper learning curve, and it's actually just intimidating. It took me 2 or 3 years in specialty coffee to feel like I could, make my own pour over at home and be comfortable with all the steps and the processes with it. But it would take no time at all to teach someone in a shop. You pull out the little bag, you say, here, you fill this with ground coffee, and you're good to go. You can cold brew at home. It's easy if you have like a home filters in your shop. We sell some, other people sell some. It's easy to put on the shelf next to the other equipment that you're selling, the other filters that you're selling, where your coffee is being sold, and that's another way to increase your ticket price, right? So if you have a way for them to brew, the reason you put filters next to the cash register is because you want them to buy those filters and then buy your coffee and go home and make it. It's the same deal here. You could tell them, hey, you got your hot coffee filters, you can get your cold brew filters, buy this for your cold brew, and you can come home and take, which and make what you just drank here, you can make that at home for the week. It's a way to increase your sales and to serve your customers better. It's a chance to engage and teach them about cold brew and the process. It's still a little bit new, I think, to a lot of people, what it even is. I explain it to people often who I think would probably likely already know. But it's a way to engage and teach your customers what it really is, and ultimately it helps you buy bags of coffee beans. So what you see on the top right is some pre-filled packets that we're working on. So the way we do Alto is only to solve people's problems. That's it. We're not going to launch things into the marketplace that haven't been specifically requested over time. And this was an interesting one that we got at the end of last year. All these people wanted to find ways to make it as easy as possible for people at home to brew cold brew. So we have the facilities and capabilities to take coffee, pre-fill them in these packets, and then put it back in bags and send it to their customer. The idea is you'll see it on the shelves if you go to like Target or something. Starbucks has these little coffee pods, Dunkin' Donuts has coffee pods, but there's not a great way for smaller specialty coffee shops to do something like this.
You're doing the actual filling and the service?
That's right.
Very cool.
Yeah, and so that's just like, because people were asking, they said, can you? We said, not yet, but we can figure it out for you. And the same deal with these home filters. On the bottom, that's just a pitcher that we sell. There's nothing special or unique or proprietary about a pitcher, right? But people just often like a pitcher to sell as a complete kit, and that can easily be branded. I mean, for any coffee shop, they can put their own name, their own logo on it. And the same deal like with the growlers. Often take one recipe, something that works, and we've seen them carry that through for years and years. And there's so much potential in cold brew that we've just barely scratched the surface of. So, I mean, I would just encourage you in your shop to test different roasts, test batch sizes, different durations, different concentrations, different equipment. And the thing to do, I mean, the thing that we did in specialty coffee, or the thing that I wasn't there, but I mean, when specialty coffee was growing, it was all about that blind taste test. That's why they started elevating cupping so much prominence, was because they wanted to have quality and the taste in the cup be the defining factor on what made something better. We should be doing that same thing in cold brew. So blind taste test, try one against the other and see what your team likes and see what your customers like ultimately, because your team could love something, but if your customers don't, one of the things to ask yourself is what's the point of all that? You'll see in this picture there's some kegs there. This particular customer brews 50 gallons at a time, and they're able to get a ton of consistency by brewing at volume in a way that 5 individual 10-gallon batches wouldn't give them that same consistency. They can have their same coffee done the same way over larger scale. That way they're able to fill all 5 of those kegs out of the same batch with the same set of parameters and tests. And so they can ensure that all of their shops are serving their customers the exact same thing. That can be difficult with cold brew, as it is with anything in your shops, is to try to keep consistency over all of your shops. Everyone makes sure they're following the same process, same procedures. And even sometimes the water is different between shops. So the way this particular customer handles that is they brew at scale and they keg. One of the last things I'll kind of suggest for you guys to think about is participation in cold brew specific events. The way specialty beer grows is they have like beer festivals. The way specialty wine grows is they have specialty wine festivals. Specialty coffee does the same thing. And you're starting to see more and more cold brew have these type of events. Coffee Fest is one of them. Coffee Fest is one of the first ones that does a cold brew competition. Cold Brew City Fest on the top right is in San Diego. What Cold Brew City Fest does is a public taste test. They do a judged taste test. But what they've done a really good job of is it's actually an extension of their local TNT down there. So their local TNT, the shops that get together to do their Thursday night throwdowns and their latte art competitions, those same shops get together and they throw once a year a Cold Brew City Fest. And it's a big deal in San Diego. All the shops that they already have are participating. Their customers come, and it's a bit of a party around cold brew, and it's not that much more difficult to plan and start than a normal TNT. So you'll start to see more and more of those come up. There's a Cold Brew Fest in Washington. that they've done. We've been to different expo last year. They had a mocktail competition. So what you see in the bottom right corner was different people. So a mocktail is like a cocktail at a bar, but we're not serving alcohol with it. Coffee's the base instead of alcohol. And the idea is they just laid out tables full of garnishes, tables full of simple syrups, tables full of different things that you can add to cold brew. And they would give like a theme. They would say just like a winter cold brew. And it would just be on the participants and the competitors to create what they thought winter cold brew was, or what they thought happy birthday cold brew was, or whatever like the goal that they were trying to meet for that round. And then it was just a head-to-head competition. People were able to then sample the different ones afterwards. And I think just things like that, as we see TNTs help with the latte art, with the espresso building coffee community, we can see that same thing in cold brew. And so one of the challenges would be for you to think about how you could get involved or even maybe start planning cold brew competitions. It's also, we've seen, become a little bit more a part of bar flow competitions. If you've seen those where they give a set number of drinks that people have to try to get out in a certain amount of time. They'll grade the drinks, they'll grade the time. We've seen mocktails become part of bar flow competitions. And so the idea is just to see how you can integrate cold brew into the rest of what specialty coffee is doing. And I think that the reason that it hadn't for so long is because cold brew hadn't changed in so long. Cold brew, to a large extent, hadn't changed over the past 50 years. We've seen a lot of innovation over the last 5, but for the longest time, it was take your leftover coffee, put it in the corner, and then serve it as an afterthought on your menu. Sometimes it was used just like whatever coffee was left over, so there was very little consistency in even what was being served. And it was served typically with iced coffee, with a bunch of ice, and that was it. And there's so much more potential in cold brew. We're seeing that now with shops experimenting. And I think a lot of the shops that you'll see doing it well are doing variations of a lot of this type of stuff. The last step, I mean, part of what made specialty coffee grow so much is becoming part of a community. And so one of the things I would suggest to this group is to be part of promoting specialty cold brew. So there's a lot of different places where you could be a part of that. On your own menu, finding ways to expand its footprint on your menu, find a way to expand its profile for your customers. At the bar, having just places set aside for cold brew. This is where we're making our mocktails. These are the garnishes that we're using. Just even having a place set aside for that. On your shelves, the stuff you sell is a reflection too of kind of your priorities and what you are working with your customers to buy. So if you have something cold brew on your shelf, that's better than 90% of the shops that we end up talking with. Very few people have cold brew related products on their shelf, and we think they should. On social media, I mean, that's a great place to increase your engagement. You can showcase a plain glass of cold brew. Sometimes is difficult to get people really excited about, but you can showcase mocktails. You can showcase events. If you start doing some of those other steps, it becomes easier to promote rather than just like a plain, dark cup of cold brew. And then to just engage with people, engage with customers, engage with people at events like this about different ideas, and just be as free as you can about sharing those ideas with others. So, I mean, that's kind of what we've laid out here. What this is just a compilation of what we've seen from shops that we've worked with, shops that we've talked to, people that we've talked to on the floor at events like this. And we think that this is like a great way to get started elevating the craft of cold brew in your shop. If you can maybe check, if this was a checklist, you can maybe check off 3 or 4 of these, and then consider one of the other 6 or 7 options is that maybe we'll do one more step next. Maybe we'll do those 2 things this next week and month, but ultimately to take steps towards making it be a bigger part, because cold brew helps even out the seasonality of coffee in a way that it used to be coffee was slammed all winter because it's cold and people are trying to get like their warm coffee, but maybe coffee shops would die down a little bit over summer. I think we're seeing cold brew help balance out that seasonality quite a bit, because cold brew is best enjoyed in summer at a time when people aren't as interested in their hot coffee. And summer's the time to take trips, and cold brew is easily something that you can take on trips. I don't know how it shows up decent. So just like a little bit about Alto Cold Brew, we're a tiny little startup. We're a lot like a lot of the companies that we work with. We only launched 2 years ago. Our first product was just intended to solve a problem for just my best friend's shop. The original goal was to solve this problem for him. He could brew better cold brew, and then we could just be done. And instead of him taking that entire order and just running through it over the course of a year and a half, based on our projections, he just gave it out to a bunch of different people and said, you guys got to try this, you got to try this. It's great. And so he came back to me in a couple months and said, we need another order. I'm like, well, we're not really a cold brew company. We just helped you. And he said, well, you're a cold brew company now. You need to help these people get a second order. And so what we heard coming into spring of 2018 was that people wanted a whole kit for commercial cold brewers and something to offer people for home brewing. And so that's just what we did. Like I said, we're waiting for customer, for us at shops, expressing interest in a product line. And our deal is we'll do our best to try to launch that for you and to solve your problem. What we found out later over summer was that they wanted smaller sizes and home brewers. They could sell a whole home brewer kit. Done. We can make that happen. In fall of that same year, we added little funnels because they thought that the filters were too skinny. Okay. We want to be here solving the shop's problems. Whatever they tell us that they want, whatever they tell us that they need, we want to be a part of that. We also were able to start customizing the home brewers. Different shops were saying, yeah, I like your logo, that's nice, but can I get mine on there? I said, yeah, sure, that's no problem. And so this whole progression of Alto Cold Brew has really just been in response to people that we want to work with, getting them closer and closer towards being able to offer more cold brew products. So over winter, we just kind of put some home kits in boxes. We had a couple shops who actually just want to brand and sell their own home filters in their own box. Done. We want the shop to be the hero in that story. It's not us. We don't need to have our brand name on anything other than if we're going to sell just a bucket, we're going to put our name on it. But if you want custom pitchers, if you want custom anything, that's kind of what we want to do, is put that shop as the hero and not us. We sent out a survey over winter of 2019. What do you guys want to see next? And that's where we came up with the stainless steel commercial brewers and the custom pre-filled packets. It's just literally as a response to shop interest, and we're trying to help them meet that needs. And so I had this big long arrow out here to the right. What's next? We don't know. Ultimately, we're going to try to be a part of wherever the industry goes next. We're going to try to be a part of helping them get there. And we want to show up to events like this. We want to speak at events like this. We want to have conversations with people like you to see where you think it can go, what we think we can do to help you get there. And that's really what we're all about. That's the shop. The idea is to kind of, in your brain, pick your own shop and look at it and see what you can kind of do to incorporate some of those things. We have a lot of this information is kind of on the website. There's some older blog posts about it and stuff. But the idea is really to look at, where are you right now? Where are you in this kind of cold brew journey? And what could be your next steps towards incorporating 1 or 2 or 3 of these things? What do you think your customers would be interested in? And then how do you think we can help you through that? So that's what I have as far as a presentation. I hope that helped kind of give you some ideas, create some inspiration, even just provide you a new way to think about cold brew as it relates to specialty coffee, as it relates to craft beer, and as it relates to kind of that fine wine progression. But basically what I have now is just time to answer questions here. Again, sorry about the AV issues at the beginning. I think they got it worked out. But I have time to answer questions, and if we can't get it answered now, we have a booth over there. It's 2222 right next to the cold brew competition, and so we'll be around all weekend. So that's what I have.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you're cold brewing, do you prefer that plastic container or stainless steel?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, food safety, when you see in kitchens, you see a lot of stainless steel everything. So, as far as a recommendation, It's probably more sanitary in the long term to hold up stainless steel, because what we see is that the stainless steel holds up to scratching better. So in the plastic ones, just like anything you're storing food in that's plastic, and there's food safe plastics everywhere. Eventually what ends up happening with the stir, somehow you're gonna get it scratched, you're gonna make it a little bit more difficult to clean, and eventually we see that shops end up replacing those over time, and the stainless steel is just more durable in that and more sanitary in that regard. But it's a brewer. A lot of shops look at the price points and they're willing to just get in at a lower price point to get themselves started.
As far as flavor though, do you think they're the same?
Yeah, we don't notice a huge flavor difference between the two. I mean, that comes down to kind of like your cleaning and stuff. It's typically you don't get a ton of metallic flavor coming through, but is that what you're thinking?
Well, I'm thinking the plastic might affect the flavor.
Oh, really? Yeah, we've actually had more complaints on the other side. I mean, we've had more people say with the metal brewers, they taste a little bit metallic. So I think it could go either way. Yeah.
Can you give a little insight on your blooming process? Kind of going off what she said, you're trying to pull as much flavor.
Sure. Yeah. So again, just to say, we don't actually brew coffee. Like, we don't want to compete with any of the people that we work with. But when we were brewing coffee for our friend, and when we brew our own cold brew, we have a kegerator at the office. So when we brew our own cold brew, we typically do like a half gallon to a gallon of a hot bloom. What we want to do is help release some of those volatile organics and the flavor compounds that don't come out in a pure cold extraction. But then we dump that 3 to 5 gallons of cold water, even ice water, on it to stop it within like a minute or two. And the idea is that we feel like that does a better job of bringing out more flavor in the cold brewing process than just straight cold brewing. We hear that that's not technically cold brew, and my response is it tastes better to us, and we think it tastes better to other people. And so that was like always our response, is like, we don't have a super strict definition of what cold brewing is. I think cold brewing is whatever tastes better in the end product, and that's the way that we prefer it for most of our for most of the stuff that we brew for ourselves. Did that answer? Yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
Would you put yourself in the situation where you're a coffee person and you're introducing cold brew to a novice and just say it's different because you take it?
Sure. Yeah, I am a lot. I talk to a lot of people about cold brew. I would say that it's different because regular hot coffee is brewed so fast and pulls so much out of it that it actually is a little bit more of a harsh experience. That's why most people end up drowning it in cream and sugar to balance out those flavors. Specialty coffee goes a good distance towards making it more palatable. They do a better job roasting and sourcing coffee. The lighter roast is less harsh flavors, but cold brew itself takes out all of those harsh flavors. It's a much smoother, much sweeter brewing process because it's not extracting all of those same things. And so what I would say is that it's a more mellow coffee experience for people, and it gives them a chance to enjoy it cold as opposed to hot. Does that help?
That's perfect.
Yeah. Sure, yeah.
What is your experience of people that like the flavor of cold brew, appreciate hot coffee, and want to heat the cold brew to regular hot coffee?
Sure. Well, that offers some benefits. Again, it falls under the experiment. If people like the way that tastes, who am I to tell them that they're wrong? But one of the benefits of that is that you can take cold brew at home, and then it can be, your specialty coffee can be ready each day if you want to heat it. And so I've seen that happen. I've done it myself. Cold morning, it's like, hey, I got a bunch of cold brew there, and I'm not interested in putting, a cold drink in me right now. So I've done that here and there, but I would say that to each their own. I mean, if they like the way that tastes, it gives them an opportunity to have specialty coffee in their house in a way that they otherwise wouldn't. Yeah. Did you have something? No. Okay. Anything else? I mean, I'm here if you need it. I'm here afterwards. Samples? Yeah, we have a ton. They're going to be at the booth. I'm not going to bring them here as part of a marketing thing, but our booth is, again, 22. We're over by the cold brew competition, and we're going to be here all weekend.